Hello, I'm Helen from Journal with Purpose and welcome to my latest YouTube video. Today I'm going to share a flip through of this little art journal. It's quite an old one now and I've just been looking back through it recently. I can't remember if I shared it on YouTube, but I loved working in this. I really want to make another one soon, but I've already got quite a few different art journals on the go. So this is a Strathmore art journal and I started this back in 2022 and I've only got a few more pages to go, so I will definitely share a flip through of this one once it's completed. I'm really loving this journal. It's a soft cover and the paper is beautiful. I also have these two Dilution art journals, and this is the one that I'm using for Wanderlust this year. So it's starting to fill up nicely, and because there's a lesson a week on there, so I'm just really enjoying slowly working through this journal. So that's probably something I'll share a flip through of once I get to the end of this journal, which will roughly be towards the end of the year. And then this is my own art journal that I just use as and when I fancy it. And so this one I started in July 23 and just love playing around with so many different ideas and techniques, just so much fun. So it takes me back to this journal. And I really want to make another one, but I'm trying to encourage myself to use up the journals that I already have, but it's just such a nice small size to work in. So this is 6-inch square and it was created using a disc-bound punch and rings. The rings on mine are 3/4 inch diameter. And I used some bookbinding card for the outside and then covered it in a collage of decoupage papers. It's a little bit rough and ready where the rings are on the inside, but I don't mind that at all. It's just given it a nice kind of covering on there. And one of the reasons I really liked working in this type of journal is because you could just take these out so they were nice and flat to work on the surface. And also if you really didn't like something, you could of course decide not to add it back into your journal. And I created this using some mixed media paper. But because it's nice and small, and because of the rings I'd often only work on one side, it was really quick and easy to work in. So maybe I will still make another one for days where I want to get creative in my art journal but don't have as much time. As I said, this is quite old, this is 2022, but I hoped it might give you some ideas for your own art journal. So for this one, I used acrylic paints in the background and then added some doodles. And I then used some masks, some stencil masks, used black paint around those and then added some writing in white gel pen on top. Here, acrylic paint, which I've then added a layer of white gesso on top, which I've rubbed off through a stencil using a baby wipe and then added a kind of focal point on top. This was stenciling using, I think, a mixture of watercolours and possibly a black acrylic ink in there as well. And a lot of my journal writing is hidden behind all of that. And that's something I really like to do, is still get my journal writing out on these pages, but perhaps sometimes it's more private thoughts or things I just want to get out of my system that I wouldn't necessarily want anybody else to be able to read, and I don't particularly want to go back and read at another time. These are using collage pieces that were created on deli paper. And I seem to remember this was from a Wanderlust class. I would have used those in my old Wanderlust journal, but then I still had some bits and pieces left over, so I decided to add it in here with lots again of mark making and doodles. I love how vibrant those pages are. This was using die cut papers and then watercolour going through those. I really like that effect. And I think this was a mixture of acrylic paint and pastels by the looks of it for the brown, and then using black acrylic paint through a stencil. And here again, I've got some more or less hidden writing. It's in white gel pen around the outside. And I've then decided to use some black fine liners to add a mandala on top. This one is created with lots of texture paste, and I've actually stamped into that texture paste when it's wet. I don't know how well you can see that, but you've got all of these kind of indentations in here. And then I've added a couple of watercolours and a metallic watercolour on top of that as well. So it's a really thick and heavy page, that, but I really like how the paints are pooling in that texture paste. And here I've used texture paste again, but through a stencil, so it's on top of my background pages. But again, used watercolours and metallics to pick up lovely little shimmers in there, but also with some collaged elements too. This was similar to another one that I did with using a baby wipe through a stencil to lift off that top layer of white paint. I really enjoy doing that. This one's just watercolours, stamping, some doodles. They're just such small squares to work on. It just really encouraged me to kind of use this on a regular basis. This has got collage, it's got some fabric tape on here. I think this was just created with the end of a pencil dipped in paint. This I love. I added some watercolour along the edge of here and tipped it up to run it down the page, and then used those wonky lines to add my journal writing in, and then just added some little flowers. They were cut out of jelly plate prints, so added those on top. These are really just a mixture of collage, often again of jelly print papers, and then I've done some stamping on top and coloured in the images. And here again, watercolour. I love using both acrylic paint and watercolour, but watercolour is definitely one of my favourite mediums. So that was just done really loose, and then I used a dip pen with, I think it was Winsor & Newton Black Indian ink on top for the outline of all those flowers. And this is watercolour on the background with some stamping, but then some pieces of torn paper added on top. This has got lots of texture paste on it, but with a watercolour background, and I just really like the effect of all the different colours kind of running together, and then used a butterfly sticker as the focal point. This one's a mixture of die cut papers and napkins. And these two pages are done in the same way, but I far prefer this colour palette. I'm not so keen on that. I think for me that pink was just too bold in contrast with the napkins. But this I really like. And through those die cut papers, I've used watercolour and pastels. And I love how those napkins are pretty much kind of just dissolved and look like they're part of the background. And so often there's not many words that you can see, but there will often be some hidden behind, or at least I'm thinking about different things and what I want to express in my art journals. One thing I always have in my art journal is a little sheet of paper where I'm writing about things that are on my mind, so that when I come to my art journal, I can think about those and how I best want to express them. This was collage with just some doodles and watercolour on top. I just softened down the collage papers using some white gesso and pastel. And this again is die cut papers with napkins. I often find when there's a technique I'm enjoying, I repeat it quite a few times just in slightly different ways throughout my art journal. So there'll often be quite a lot of repetition throughout 6 or 12 months, and then I might get a bit more fixated on something else. That's just the way it goes. And so this was, you can probably see there's quite a lot of writing in the background there, but it's pretty much obscured by acrylic paint with then some white acrylic paint stenciling on top. And then I've used similar colours on this, but this has got texture paste and a watercolour background. And then my final page in here, this was definitely an experiment and not that successful, though I do like the colours. But again, I did some stamping down into some texture paste. But I think just some of the colours perhaps merged together a little bit too much. I probably added too much water, so it's washed it out a little bit, but I'm still quite pleased with that. But I love having this little journal to experiment in. So I think I felt a certain comfort in knowing that I could just take these out and then decide whether I wanted to add them to my pages. I don't think the actual punch that I used is available anymore, but there's lots of different disc bound punches and discs. These ones have got holes in them, but they don't have to. So I'll leave a link to perhaps a punch and some discs down below in case you're interested in having a go at making your own. Yeah, I just had so much fun in this journal, and I think that it gave me some more freedom to experiment and play, so I may well decide to make another one of these. It is old, but I really hope you've enjoyed seeing through it. As always, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's joined me over on Patreon. Well, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you're doing really well, and I look forward to speaking with you really soon in my next video.